Good day, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Subramaniam Masalamani. I'm a Tamil. Today, my topic is Sri Lanka reconciliation is no substitute for human rights violations and genocide. There lies a tiny island in the Indian Ocean called Sri Lanka that is attempting to disrupt and drag the whole world back to primitive nature. A head of a nation or law enforcement agency that can be found guilty if he or she fails to investigate a crime which he or she reasonably knows has occurred. Now that the reputable World Organization has found credible evidence, if Mahinda Rajapaksa fails to investigate, he can be found guilty of blanket crime. No further proceedings necessary. The acid test is due diligence. Did he or did he not investigate the miscarriage of the right to life, the very basis of international human rights laws, which transcend national borders and barriers? Taking away one's life is an irrevocable crime. Irrevocable crime. The punishment for which is death penalty. Life sentence is mere provision for in case any miscarriage in the process of judiciary. That is how much precious life is. Since life is irretrievable or redeemable, human rights laws are enforced vigorously. Russia sentenced a man to death penalty for killing a human rights lawyer. In Sri Lanka, large-scale murders were committed. The prime suspect is Mahinda Rajapaksa. He says, I am reconciling with the families of the loved ones who killed under my decree. Therefore, I am not guilty of murder. Right to life laws argue otherwise. The issue at hand is between Mahinda Rajapaksa and the right to life, which he is trying to deflect as an issue between the Sri Lankan nation and the United Nations. United Nations is merely a purveyor of the right to life laws. The killing of innocent Tamil civilians amounts to an indictable offense under human rights law of the world. What Mahinda Rajapaksa is attempting is to replace the magisterial judgment with political judgment while whipping up emotions of his nation and the international community. Our duty as displaced diaspora is to keep the world on real time with counter arguments and evidences. There is no substitute for retribution. It's a law of the nature. Repentance may be commendable, but reconciliation is making fool out of the civilized world, where benefit of the doubt is the norm, but misused by many criminals like Mahinda Rajapaksa. Reconciliation is no substitute for retribution, and repentance has to be felt while serving the sentence. Repentance without retribution is wishful thinking, but will not serve the purpose. Repentance must continue during the rehabilitation period after serving the sentence. It's a lifetime imprisonment. The country of Sri Lanka has a moral issue. It is in their culture over 2,500 years. A culture of crime without repentance has pushed the nations backwards. The media must not support bad people. Put in simple terms, freedom with protection is not the norm or respected by Mahinda Rajapaksa. It's bad for all, including the people who subscribe to it. Who in their right mind will invite a known murderer into his presidential palace? Mahinda Rajapaksa's involvement in crime since 1970 has been known all over the world capitals. His picture along with Jakadaya, a serial killer, is circulated worldwide. Sri Lanka has made itself a pariah nation. This country has to work on its image first by respecting international organizations, laws, and protocols. The more it defies UN, more damaging it will be. Have you ever seen Russia, China, or India criticizing the United Nations? United Nations is not LTTE for you to go out and disgrace it. When you disgrace United Nations, you are disgracing all the nations. The current strategy of Mahinda Rajapaksa resembles a plot by a few rogues and rowdies who have got into power and misused the nation. Nations like Russia and China have found a way to stabilize their countries. They have found the American way of economic prosperity. The best Sri Lanka can expect from China and Russia is abstinence at the Security Council. Take it from me. If a motion is brought by the United Nations, no one will object to it. If it is brought by any other nation, they may object, but if it is United Nations, they will not object. I think Mahinda Rajapaksa must clearly understand it. The best he can do is to allow an independent commission set up by a United Nations to investigate with total freedom and transparency. He must accept his criminal outlook and seek counseling. He is suffering from a moral disease of narcissism. Sri Lanka must start visualizing a nation without Rajapaksas. Sri Lanka is guilty by default. That is, by refusing an outside agency to investigate war crimes, it is deemed guilty and it is guilty by default. The verdict is made and it is obvious. All they have to do is to fill in the blanks. Magisterial judgments need deliberation in a court of law. Political judgments are deliberated among the wider world populations. World has deliberated and passed a judgment. Sri Lanka is guilty of human rights violations. Only way you can disprove is to allow unfettered access to investigations and to go onto the International Crime Tribunal and present your case. Human rights is not United Nations or Darusman decree. It's a moral, natural, and universal law. Do you hope to live in a nation that has no respect for human lives? I am asking you, as a reader, how safe are you in Sri Lanka? You think you are safe? What people are saying is that we don't blame Tamils who want to separate. If they are so nasty and defiant to one of the most powerful organizations in the world, how they would have treated a small minority of Tamil people. To understand the power and force of the human rights laws, we must go to the original covenant, which says man's original and basic need is self-preservation. And when he enters a social context, he makes a social contract with the rest of the men who will ensure the preservation of his life and his means to life. The Sinhalese people and their establishment must understand these are basic covenants. Otherwise, they will perish under their own tyranny. But you can rest assured, Mahinda Rajapaksa and few others will be going to the gallows. It's a question of who is going to do it. Sri Lankans must hand over these people to the International War Crimes Tribunal and get on with their life. Gaddafi is going, and will be gone soon. Next is Iran, and then Sri Lanka. It will be all done from inside. Who will do it? How it will be done will be, as always, a method unheard of. There will be no precedents to plan for. How long can criminals live in bunkers? Sri Lankan people must rise up and put these criminals in their own jail and save the world of unwanted work and responsibility. You elected him, you dispose him. 150,000 people are missing, and the government of Sri Lanka has a responsibility to tell the loved ones what happened. Tamils within Sri Lanka may keep quiet for fear of reprisal. But what about I outside the country lost my nephew and he was not in the LTTE? Can you find out what happened to him? Therefore, stop your hypocrisy and get down to providing credible answers. Trying to bury a mountain of human rights violations and genocide is a molehill of sovereignty and right to investigate is like pulling wool over our face or sending us on a wild goose chase. For every smart crook, remember Mr. Rajapaksa, there is a smarter crook out there. The diaspora must press the refresh button regularly to keep human rights violations and the genocide alive in the minds of the international community. Since the Tamils living in Sri Lanka are living in a dungeon with a cyclops watching from outside, they try to equate peace with freedom. Peace with freedom. What other choice do they have? To preserve oneself, one has to be prudent. It does not mean there is freedom of speech or action. If there are any Tamils who can openly speak, that is the diaspora. Some diaspora still live in the constant fear in the Western world. They should read the Constitution and the Charter of Rights and the Bill of Rights and understand their rights and freedoms. There was a war between the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Nadu, who represented the Tamils of Sri Lanka, and the Sri Lankan government military representing the majority Sinhalese. The war ended with the LTT losing the war. During this war, the Sri Lankan military composed of Sinhalese committed human rights violations to innocent Tamil citizens caught in the war and to the LTT cadre that surrendered. There is more than compelling evidences. Sri Lankan government did not allow any media or United Nations to monitor the progress of the war. As the world government, United Nations must have unhindered access to war zone to protect the innocent citizens who have nothing to do with the war. Sri Lankan government did not allow unhindered monitoring of the war. There is no reason for it. Sri Lankan government believed that whatever happened during the war sooner or later loses its memory and power. Now they are saying a different story, contradictory to what they said to the world of nations and the public during the war. Two different statements, two different mindsets. The United Nations knows what the two dichotomies are. But do the outside nations and people know exactly what they said? The Sri Lankan government plays a psychological situation of human memory. What does not affect me vividly does not stay in my memory too long. It's like a scar on our skin. Some scars go away, some stay. It is the duty of the diaspora to keep pressing the refresh button regularly to keep the past remembered in the minds of the international community, the nations, and the international institutions. For the last 60 years, and especially during the war, for unwanted and unnecessary reasons, violence was directed against innocent Tamils in Sri Lanka, who had nothing to do with the war. It was a policy of misguided, fanatical religious establishment and the narcissistic racial political scoundrels who, for their selfish purpose, dragged the nation into social destruction. Today, Sinhalese are either household mates in the Middle East or housekeeping workers for the tourists. This minded policy neither benefits the Sinhalese nor the Tamils. It is in the interest of both Tamils and Sinhalese people this nation has to be salvaged from outside. Tamil people have to be salvaged and the Sinhalese people have to be guided in the right direction. If the Sinhalese are left the way they are, they will continue to subscribe to fanaticism and racism. They had to be educated in freedom, moral justice, liberty, fraternity, and equality, and important all social responsibility and moral justice. All these qualities arise from the right to life, which are human right laws. Humans are born with that faculty of moral compass, but can also be made to focus in the wrong direction. Sri Lankan situation is a great example and eye-opener to the rest of the world to promote social unity and social responsibility and to preserve the social contract that gave us the power over the beast and to a certain extent over Mother Nature. We have a great world of social unity, social responsibility, and social security. But there lies a tiny island in the Indian Ocean that is attempting to disrupt and drag the whole world back to primitive nature. That's all, folks, for this week. As I always say, Tamil 70 million worldwide, unite, stay together, work hard, and never ever give up. The best is yet to come. My name is Subramaniam Maslamani. I'm a world-class Tamil, powered by convictions, commitments, and conscience.